All right, ladies and gentlemen of the press. That includes you, Michelle? Yeah, sorry. Let's try to be a little more formal around here, I think. All right. This morning, the Secretary General of the United Nations announced the launch of his high-level expert group on net zero emissions commitment of non-state entities. He was joined by the chair of this group, McKenna, who is the former Canadian Minister of Environment and Climate Change. In his remarks, the Secretary General said that while governments have the lion's share of responsibility to achieve net zero emissions by mid-century, we also need every business, investor, city, state, region to walk the talk on their net zero promises, and this is why he's launching this expert group. The group will make recommendations for more credible and robust standards and criteria for measuring, analyzing, and reporting the net zero pledges by non-state entities. And after my briefing, we will be joined by Ms. McKenna, as well as Selwyn Hart, who you know is the Secretary General Special Advisor on Climate Action, and they will brief you on this new group of experts. Also this morning and a bit earlier, the Secretary General spoke via live video link to the high-level pledging event on Afghanistan. He noted that despite our collective efforts, the already dire humanitarian situation in Afghanistan has deteriorated alarmingly over the past months. The Secretary General pointed out that some 95% of people do not have enough to eat, and 9 million people are at risk of famine, and global food prices are skyrocketing as a result of the war in Ukraine. Afghanistan's own economy has effectively collapsed, and more than 80% of the population are in debt, he added. The Secretary General stressed that the international community must find ways to spare the Afghan people from the impact of the decision to halt development support to Afghanistan and to freeze nearly $9 billion in Afghan assets overseas. At the same time, the Secretary General said he deeply regrets excuse me. At the same time, the Secretary General said he deeply regrets that girls' education above 6th grade remains suspended in Afghanistan, a violation of the equal rights of girls that damages the entire country and leaves girls more exposed to violence, poverty, and exploitation. He stressed that there is simply no justification for this discrimination. The Secretary General noted that the funding appeal for Afghanistan this year is $4.4 billion, the world's largest appeal for a single country. And so far, the appeal is less than 13% funded. A press release about the event and the pledges received will be on OCHA's website a bit later on today, and they will also be doing the accounting with the money. Moving on to Ukraine, I have quite a bit of an update for you. Our humanitarian colleagues have just told us that today another UN-led interagency humanitarian convoy safely reached Sumy, a city that, as we all know, has been heavily impacted by the war. This is the second time that we and our partners have managed to deliver much-needed assistance to people living in Sumy and nearby communities. This follows the first UN-led convoy, which arrived in Sumy on March 18th, and the third successful interagency humanitarian convoy in the past 2 weeks. Today's convoy, which was included 7 trucks, delivered food, medicines, and hygiene products that will be distributed by Ukrainian Red Cross Society and its local partners, and that will take place in the days ahead. This included food for nearly 6,000 people provided by WFP and the NGO People in Need, hygiene products for about 6,000 people, also from the same NGO, blankets, sleeping bags, solar lamps for more than 1,500 people from UNHCR, and critical medical supplies for over 10,000 people for the next 3 months from our colleagues at the World Health Organization. In a statement issued today, the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Asnat Lubrani, said the humanitarian notification system with the Ukraine and the Russian Federation, which is being facilitated by our colleagues at OCHA, enabled safe passage for today's convoy. But it is clearly not enough, she stressed. She added that we need to reach the most vulnerable people affected by the grave humanitarian crisis across Ukraine. We and our partners still have not been able to reach areas where people are in desperate need of support, including Mariupol, Kherson, and Chernihiv, despite extensive efforts and ongoing engagements with the parties to the conflict. We are continuing our dialogue with both parties to the conflict with the aim of urgently, immediately, consistently negotiating and facilitating the delivery of critical humanitarian assistance to the people who've been hardest hit by this ongoing war. For its part, the UN Population Fund tells us that today it has transported 3,000 dignity kits containing soap, underwear, and other basic items, and essential hygiene items to social service centers, shelters, and crisis rooms for gender-based violence survivors in Dnipro, Poltava, and Zaporizhia. Also today, in a statement, the head of UN Women, Sima Bahous, noted that women and girls constitute approximately 90% of all the people that have been displaced from Ukraine. That is a very high number. She warned that they are uniquely exposed to gender-based specific risks such as trafficking, sexual and gender-based violence, and denial of access to essential services and goods. Our friends in Geneva, the International Organization for Migration, said they have received shipments of 20,000 high-energy biscuits to its warehouse in Lviv. The mission will send the stocks to eastern Ukraine and distribute to those most in need, targeting children and pregnant and lactating mothers in particular. IOM is providing food assistance for certain isolated areas in Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast. Also, we've just received another $80 million in the last few days for our humanitarian appeal for Ukraine, which puts the $1.1 billion appeal at about 51% funded. Yesterday, turning to Syria, yesterday, UN interagency cross-line convoy of 14 trucks carrying food for some 43,000 people, non-food and health assistance items, crossed from Aleppo to Sarmada in the northwest of the country. There are 4.1 million men, women, and children in the northwest of Syria that rely on aid to meet their most basic needs. 80% of them are women and children, 80%. Humanitarian conditions in the area are deteriorating due to the ongoing hostilities and a deepening economic crisis. This is the third cross-line convoy reaching the northwest in line with UN Interagency Operational Plan and backed by Security Council Resolution 2585, which calls for both cross-line and cross-border convoys. We continue to urge increased access to all communities in Syria in need of humanitarian assistance. Cross-line missions are complementary to the cross-border operations, which includes 800 trucks a month delivering food and other life-saving aid to 2.4 million people. And on a related note, today the World Food Program says that as the month of Ramadan begins, the soaring cost of food staples in import and dependent Middle Eastern and North African countries is creating even greater challenges for millions of families already struggling to keep hunger at bay. WFP warns that this year millions will be struggling to buy even the most basic food items for their families as the conflict in Ukraine has pushed food prices even higher than the troubling levels at the start of the year. According to WFP, the prices of wheat and flour and vegetable oil. I'm not used to people whistling at me. According to WFP, the prices of wheat and flour and vegetable oil, two key staples in the diet of most families, has consistently risen across the region. Cooking oil is up 36% in Yemen and 39% in Syria. Wheat flour, 47% in Lebanon and 15% in Libya and 14% in Palestine. With global food prices rising, WFP's meager resources for operation in the regions, especially in Yemen and Syria, will be even under more pressure than before. In both countries, conflicts to the related economic shrinkage have left more than 29 million people in need of food assistance. WFP is supporting nearly 19 million people in those two countries. This just in. Thank you. And an update on the ongoing operations following the helicopter crash in the Congo. Our colleagues at the peacekeeping mission report that the site where the helicopter carrying 8 of our peacekeeping colleagues crashed has now been secured by the mission, and a preliminary investigation is underway. A ceremony to honor the fallen peacekeepers from Pakistan and the Republic of Serbia and the Russian Federation is planned for Saturday in Goma. And in South Sudan, we, along with our partners, have launched the Humanitarian Response Plan for 2022 to reach 6.8 million people of the most vulnerable. We need $1.7 billion for that. More than 2/3 of the people in South Sudan, that's 8.9 million people, are estimated in need of humanitarian assistance. A majority of them, that's 8.3 million, are expected to experience severe food insecurity by the peak of the lean season, which is from May to July. Last year, we reached over 5.3 million people with food, health, water, sanitation, education, livelihoods, and nutrition, as well as protection. Quick update from Mali, where the UN peacekeeping mission there says they're deeply concerned about the deteriorating security situation in the tribe border area, which is between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, as well as its impact on civilian population. Our peacekeeping colleagues say that attacks by armed terrorist groups have had a devastating impact on the already distressed civilian population. The localities of Tessit, Talatye, Atsongo, and the Menaka region have been particularly impacted. Dozens of people have died, and there are also significant population displacements in the towns of Gao and Asongo. In response to this situation, peacekeepers deployed a unit to the area over a week ago and is in the process of deploying another one today. Mission teams have also been mobilized to better assess the impact of the violence on communities. Fact-finding teams of human rights violations and abuses have been initiated. The mission remains in close contact with the Malian authorities to determine that additional support could be provided to the population. And quick travel announcement for you. The head of our office for West Africa and the Sahel, Mahatma Saleh Anadif, is in Sierra Leone for a 2-day visit. He will meet with President Bio as well as the former President Koroma, and will have meetings with various Sierra Leonean stakeholders. The mission is part of his activities to support countries in the sub-region in their efforts to consolidate peace and development. And the UN team in Albania, led by Fiona McClooney, the resident coordinator, continues supporting the authorities there to respond to the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring continuity of essential services while boosting laws to protect vulnerable groups, including people with stateless status and children. On the health front, we provided ambulances, equipment for rapid COVID-19 detection, reached more than 100,000 children over 300 schools with COVID-19 prevention material. In the last year, more than 60,000 health staff and volunteers were trained on infection prevention, control, and surveillance, while 7,000 newborns benefited from improved quality of neonatal care. And our team also reached 10,000 children and parents with hygiene supplies. 9,000 women got tested for cervical cancer, and 1,500 patients received radiotherapy. 1 second, you have to pass today's geography quiz. Yep. We have now reached 80 fully paid up member states. This particular member state is a favorite of our friend Matthew Nimitz. The Republic of North Macedonia. There you go. You didn't even try. I'm gonna go with Ibtisam, then you, Michelle.
Thank you, Steph. So the German defense minister said in a short stakeout after she met the Secretary General that she is skeptical that the Russians are going to hold their promises when it comes to Ukraine, given the fact that they broke them more than in one occasion. So does the Secretary General share her opinion, and could you please say more on her meeting with the SG? Thank you.
Sure. I don't have much more on the meeting with the SG. I haven't had a chance to talk to him since the meeting. We're obviously very much following the situation on the ground in Mariupol and in other places, with reports or promises by various entities of opening up corridors, of cessation of hostilities. What we need is for those statements to be transferred into concrete action. We are, as I've just said, we're desperately trying to reach people in Kharkiv, Mariupol, and other places that need our help. We're not so much in the prediction business. We just want statements and promises to be turned into concrete action that'll benefit people.
Until now, the promises you were giving, they were not.
Well, I mean, these are not promises made to us. What I will say, and I think it needs underscoring, we've just gotten our third convoy through, thanks to the coordination with the military, whether it's the Ministry of Defense in Moscow or the Ministry of Defense in Ukraine. This is part of the coordination work that we started over 2 weeks ago now, which mirrors similar arrangements we have in different parts of the world. So, we have seen some progress in certain parts. We've got a second convoy into Sumy. Obviously, it's not nearly enough, but those are things that are progressing in the correct way. Michelle.
Thanks, Steph. The Chinese Special Representative for the Korean Peninsula is in town. Has he met with the SG or any other, or does he plan to meet with the SG or any other UN officials?
I didn't see him on the SG schedule, but I will double check. Okay.
I appreciate any kind of readout you can offer. And then on Ethiopia, the Human Rights Council approved the independent investigation in December, which is on top of the joint UN-Ethiopian Human Rights Commission investigation. Ethiopia has proposed that it not be funded. What are the Secretary General's thoughts on an independent investigation into what's happened in Ethiopia?
Look, as a matter of principle, we believe that commissions voted on by member states, by the Human Rights Council, should be funded, right? They are an independent and very important part of the human rights architecture. We also believe that whether it's in Ethiopia or anywhere else in the world, human rights violations need to be investigated, which is a critical part of the accountability pillar. Yep. Right.
On Tunisia, the president announced the dissolution of the suspended and elected parliament. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, we note with concern the decision taken to dissolve parliament. We urge all Tunisian actors to avoid actions that may increase political tensions any further.
Another question, if I may, on the situation in Jerusalem. The far-right Israeli Knesset member Itamar Ben Gvir stormed Al-Aqsa compound under the Israeli police protection. In time, the tension is already high, and ahead of Ramadan.
We believe two things very strongly as a matter of principle: that no actions should be taken to further raise tensions, especially at a month where we have three major religions kind of because of the calendars coinciding with their major holidays. And we've always believed that the status quo around the holy sites in Jerusalem should be preserved. Oui.
Merci. The IAEA Director General, he was in Ukraine this week. I don't know if he's still there. My question is he supposed to brief the Security Council, or has he been approached? Thank you.
Short answer is I don't know. He has previously briefed the Security Council. You remember there was that rather dramatic briefing from a plane, which I think was a first, even by our standards. So I mean, I can't speak for him, but I have no doubt if the council presidency requests his briefing, he will brief. I don't have any updates on his activities today, but you should check with our IAEA colleagues. We can give you some contacts. Alan, and then we'll come back up.
Thanks so much, Stéphane. Today, the UK government announced sanctions against a number of Russian state media, including journalists. Those sanctions imply assets freeze. Just any comment regarding that? How does that correspond with the principles of freedom of media?
Well, we've seen a lot of bilateral sanctions being imposed during this conflict. We feel, our field is really the UN imposed sanctions. As a matter of principle, we very much do believe in the right of journalists to do their work everywhere. Ms. Fasulo.
Thank you, Steph. I'd like to talk to you about the if UN agencies are buying food from Russia. You've mentioned that there are soaring prices around the world. Russia has provided wheat, food, et cetera, in the past. And I was just wondering if the UN is continuing to buy from Russia, or is there a policy about not buying, or how is the UN implementing the sort of Western sanctions?
Well, we've always strongly believed that humanitarian work should not be impacted by sanctions. I can check with WFP where they're purchasing their wheat and their whatever grains they buy. As you mentioned, they have said that globally the prices have gone up. What I do know is that the vast majority of the food they're distributing in Ukraine is purchased on the local market. But I will have our friends at WFP get back to you. Yes, Fethi, and then.
Thank you, Steph. With regard to the pledging conference for Afghanistan, my question is there any conditions attached from the United Nations while negotiating with Taliban to provide the necessary aid for its people, to link it to the girls' education as a way of behavior modification?
I would encourage you to read or listen to what the Secretary General just said this morning, which he said that the people of Afghanistan should not be held hostage by certain policies of the de facto authorities. We've all expressed our disappointment, our outrage at this ongoing suspension of education for girls over the 6th grade. But I think the question that you asked is very clearly answered by the Secretary General in his text.
Does the Secretary General have any ideas about any tactics that might be used?
Again, I would encourage you to read the text, because he does call on those who are able to bear pressure on the Taliban to do so. Ms. Salome.
Thanks, Steph. Does the UN have any presence in Mariupol? I'm looking back through the notes.
No, I do not believe we do at this point.
Okay. Any knowledge? We've seen that a Red Cross warehouse was hit there. Russia has said that they were not stopping anyone from getting out of Mariupol, and accused Ukraine of using human shields or preventing people from leaving. I'm not sure if you've been asked about this before.
No, I mean, we've seen a lot of back and forth on that file. Our colleagues at the ICRC, the International Committee for the Red Cross, are in the lead on the issue of moving people. We're focusing on moving goods. They're focusing on moving people out of harm's way. I would encourage you to reach out to them. But I think it's been whether these corridors are working. It's pretty clear to see. Either people are moving out safely to where they want to go, or they're not. And I don't think we've seen the kind of movements of people to safety that we'd like to see. Let's go to the Celias in Espanol, and then en français, I think she was asking as well. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Steph. Quick question about the numbers have past completely the possibility of the worst case scenario of 4 million refugees, half of them children. How's the United Nations preparing for what comes next? I mean, we're over a month on this situation. Some of the people are actually coming back into Ukraine. Some of the ones that have fled are trying to come back to their houses. Have you seen that combination of people trying to go back into some of the areas? And then the second question I have, is there any possibility for the Secretary General to get more involved on questioning the possibility of denouncing war crimes, as Michelle Bachelet did yesterday of the...
Well, I think everybody, let me take your last question first. Every part of the UN system has its role to play. The High Commissioner for Human Rights is very much playing her role. The Secretary General fully backs her in those actions. For the Secretary General, it's very clear that we are continuing to denounce human rights violations, the possibility of crimes, war crimes being committed. But the Secretary General is not a judicial authority. So they are parts of the UN system, whether it's the IC, the International Criminal Court, and others that have been seized. They are doing their job. The Secretary General fully supports all of the mechanisms we have towards accountability of war crimes. We had planning figures, worst case scenarios. We are sadly at the worser case scenario now. So plans are being updated very quickly. We have a lot of, we have a lot of people on the ground, and we have no choice but to adapt to the worsening humanitarian situation, which I think increases even our efforts and our voice to find a humanitarian ceasefire, to get a humanitarian ceasefire as quickly as possible to avoid things getting even worse. Okay, Iftikhar. I'll go online. Iftikhar, and then we'll go Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Steph. I heard the update you have given on the tragic helicopter crash in Democratic Republic of Congo. But two more points. When are the bodies of the fallen UN peacekeepers going to be repatriated? And number two, all the reports coming out of Goma have stated that that the helicopter was shot down, but there has been no comment from your side.
Oh, of course. I mean, we take these investigations very seriously. The forensics needs to be done. The aircraft has to be examined. Other things have to be looked at. So we don't want to jump to any conclusions. On the issue of the bodies, the work on the repatriation of the bodies is underway to Pakistan, to the Russian Federation, and to the Republic of Serbia. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. Today, Israeli invaded the refugee camp in Jenin and killed 3 Palestinians. One of them is 17-year-old. Do we expect a statement from the SG or his special envoy in Palestine, Tor Winsland, or the Palestinian blood is cheaper than that of the Israelis?
Look, on your last editorial comment, I think I would just refer you to all the things we've said over the years, the reporting we've done on what is going on. Human blood is human blood, and they all have the same value. On your first part, we will check with the Special Coordinator's office. Okay.
The Israeli minister also today, he called on Israelis, anyone who has a gun, to keep it on and to carry it. Do you have any comment on that?
I do not have any comment. Okay. I will get our guests, and we'll be right back. Please do not go away.